Welcome to the Insight for ICOs marketing. Can I just get a quick show of hands who's actively involved in ICOs in the room so we can generally get a barometer of? So I would say about, we know you. Right, we'd say about 70%. Okay, all right, so we can sort of set the bar a little higher and kick off. So I'll do a quick brief. I'm Ismail Malik, founding the first blockchain lab and currently editor-in-chief of the ICO Crowd, which is both a network and a digital and print publication. We'll do a quick round of introductions. We'll keep it pretty short, and then we can sort of really dig in and maybe get some difficult questions. And if you want, we can potentially do 15 minutes towards the end for Q&A, since most of you are sort of actively involved in the ICO space. Okay.
Sure. Hi, my name is Yuvia Ivanova. I'm the co-founder of Future Thinkers podcast and Crypto Radio podcast. I've been a media entrepreneur for 10 years, and I've recently started building a platform that connects crypto investors with blockchain startups, kind of like AngelList for blockchain.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicholas Merton, otherwise known as DataDash. I run the largest YouTube cryptocurrency channel. I do a mix of things. I cover fundamental and technical analysis on crypto markets, so I try to not only trade markets and teach people how to trade in cryptocurrencies, but I also teach about fundamentals. I try to find good projects and explain them in a brief video so people can understand them. And I think through the community that we've built, we've been able to grow the largest channel because we're based on integrity, communication, and helping people learn about this space for the long term.
Hi, I'm Nimrod. I'm SIRIN Labs Chief Marketing Officer. We recently concluded the fourth largest ICO, raised $157.8 million for the purpose of developing the Fini phone, which is the first blockchain-based phone with a cold storage crypto wallet.
My name is Grace, or Rebecca Rachmany. I am the founder of iWriteICOWhitepapers.com, and I don't anymore. I have 6 people who do that. I also run a DAO leadership organization where we train the leaders who've already raised money, and they're like, oh, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part is actually running the company and having some management leadership training. So that's what I do. Yeah. Okay. And I see a lot of ICOs at the really beginning stages. Because of what we do, people come to us first. So I get to go through the whole process with you guys.
So maybe we can kick off with you, Yubi. When you go around this audience and around the room, the key question we're getting, and I'm getting quite often, I'm sure many people in here, is how do we assess the credibility of the execution team or the management team in an ICO? So if we can sort of take our takes on prior to taking on a project and when you're promoting a PR, where's the sort of credibility meter, or how do you sort of do the credibility test, as it were?
Wow, you're starting with a tough one. Some things are obvious, right? You look at people's LinkedIn profile and you're like, do they actually know about this industry? It's kind of amazing to me. I had some people come to me recently, and they had this ICO in the area of lending. And they were telling me the problems with SALT, and that they were going to do something in the area of lending. And I said, so who do you have on your team? And they're like, well, we're experienced. We raised X amount of money in an ICO last year, and I have a CTO. I'm like, you don't have any domain expertise. They're like, what do you mean? I raised money in an ICO. I'm like, you're trying to run a bank, and none of you are bankers, right? Like, it's usually extremely obvious. Now, having said that, I'm a big believer in new people who are doing new ideas, particularly in this space, because we have so much opportunity that none of us, like, I'm the expert at writing ICO white papers. Like, how long have I been doing that, right? Oops. So I'm a big believer in being able to learn. But when you talk to somebody who's not experienced, first of all, they should say that, like I just did, right? But they should also, you say, okay, what's the real problem, and who have you talked to of your customers? If you haven't talked to any customers, so like people get up there on the stage and they're like, there's a big problem in this space, who have you actually talked to? How many of them have you actually talked to? And what words did they use to describe their problem? If you can't answer the what word does your client use to describe their problem, you don't know anything about the space.
Actually, and you know, I highly respect you and your work, but I don't think anyone should have an exterior writer for white papers. If the company can write its own white paper, then I wouldn't even consider investing, because that means that the team, the founding team, doesn't know what they're actually offering if they need somebody's help. One of the most important things for us was to have full transparency over our professional capabilities of the team. We had 40 people that already developed a mobile phone, and what we did is we just presented the entire team on our webpage with direct link to their LinkedIn, so people could have actively engaged with them. And we also took a very bold decision on having the entire team manage the community and the Telegram, which I think created a very sticky community and a happy community, knowing that even the chief security officer or the VP R&D is actually actively answering their questions. And I think this is what created the credibility that led us to successfully raise $157 million.
Well, I'd say that this topic's very interesting. For myself, I have to do a lot of this in regards to team evaluation, because it's an essential component not only to a new tech-based company, but to an ICO or any other crypto project. I kind of go through a two-step process. First and foremost is when you have the information available. You have team members who have experience, people who've worked at Fortune 500 companies or have created other successful projects in the past, so it shows that they can deliver. But there's what I like to call gems in regards to some projects. If you take a look at projects like Cardano, for example, it has someone like Charles Hoskinson in it. Now, I understand it's silly to say that that's a singular selling point to a project being good. But there's a reason why projects that people like Charles are involved in, or people like Vitalik Buterin, who is behind the Ethereum project as well, when he serves as an advisor on a board, you can obviously see ICOs raise a lot more money, the price goes up more faster on exchanges, and there's a reason for that fundamentally. Because there's a lot of people who are entering into this space, and they might be A+ developers, they might be A+ marketers, but they don't understand the space. They haven't been in it for 5 to 10 years, ever since the founding years of Bitcoin. And because of that, people like Vitalik and Charles are gems in that space. They actually care about the technology. They're from the cypherpunk movement in a sense, which actually cared about what this whole movement is about. And they understand the core fundamentals. They're not going to get lost in how much capital can we raise, and we're just going to toss every industry on the blockchain. So that's what you want to look for with ICOs predominantly, and what I look for personally. If, however, you're working with a team of people who worked in traditional markets of technology and not blockchain, which is well over, I think, 9/10 of the case, if you're working with an ICOs that's raising a lot of money, like she was saying earlier, you have to know the absolute core concept of what you're building on the project, and if they can't translate that, or they haven't built something in that space before, you could be running into a lot of trouble. So you need to have people who understand the practicality of blockchain and what it's meant for, and what industries, what niche markets it can tap into, because again, I see a lot of ICOs that are trying to put things on the blockchain that can't make it there. And then also have people who can explain the application of their technology. And if they can't put it in a simple, elevator pitch within 30 seconds, it's usually not worth millions of dollars, or at least the millions that they're raising.
So I've been a media entrepreneur for 10 years, so I understand the perspective of media people and entrepreneurs, and also I've been a blockchain investor for the last 6 months or so, which is not that long, but I'm starting to understand that perspective as well. And this is really interesting because those three groups want different things, but what they want, it does align between the 3 points. And so it's really important to try to understand the other person's perspective. What do they actually want? And a lot of the time you can just ask, like, what are you looking for? It's such a simple question, but when I get pitches all day long from these ICOs that want me to cover them, and they're not even curious about what I want as a media person or as an investor, that's mind-boggling for me, because it's such a simple question, and I will tell them. And then maybe they can provide that. But in terms of what I look for, I think that so many of these projects don't even have a viable business model. And yes, you can build a user base, you can build a platform that maybe possibly somebody will use, And maybe they will use it, but where's the longevity in that? You need a business model to sustain it for the long term. So that's what I like to look at. How is this business going to make money?
This one's about, hey guys, sorry I joined a little late. I'm Shash. I do business development for altcoin bars. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. I think this question is about viability and
credibility.
So I think at the initial level, the most important thing is for an investor or for even us to look at is if you can simply trust the team. And that's the key at an initial level, because so many older projects have, changed their white papers into blue papers and then gray papers and then, iterations after iterations. So, and still they're on it. So if the team is good, you can trust them with your money. And even if you lose 10%, 20%, you won't lose 100%. And that's essentially what I'm looking at before we do a review on the channel. And the second thing is, will they be able to create a hype? And that stems from the team itself. And then I think one of the least important things that I really look at is the idea behind it. Simply because at an ICO stage, if there is a good team, and there's a hype, they have some kind of a prototype, the idea behind it can eventually come into play, in my opinion. If the team is good, they'll end up doing something good, in my opinion.
I wanted to add to that. So, other people have already talked about the team's past successes, their past businesses, or do they have industry experience, both in traditional industry and in the blockchain industry. But my educational background is in psychology, so I also like to look at people's character, because sometimes you might have really competent people who have other problems. For example, they might start fires with other companies, or they might, not work well with others. They might blow up their own team. And that's really important for the longevity of the project, because if you have somebody who is really volatile as a person, that project may not succeed simply because of that. So I think that's an important thing to look at. And how you can look at that is basically just, look up somebody's name, scandal, or just follow them on Twitter and see how they interact with people.
Okay.
Volatile people in a volatile market is not a good combination.
Unless you like volatility. But so brand awareness. So we've got a new flurry of sort of PR-ready San Francisco type ICOs. Perfectly packaged in brand, but there's not really much substance. But Nimrod, maybe you can come in on this, because you really successfully portrayed a genuine brand, and sort of maybe just tell us how you managed to sort of achieve that.
So I think going back to the prior question, it's all about credibility. I think that one of the best ways in order to create brand awareness is to really create a very coherent story, and this story is something that needs to be built on reality and facts, on prior successes of the team, on where you're taking your product, what kind of vision that you're trying to communicate to your audience, and then keep it mantrized. Basically, it has to be always repeated. Don't change the story every week. Try to be very, very consistent. It's one, I think, of the most important things that creates credibility and will help people grasp what you're trying to understand. To be honest, we did several things that really helped us create a brand awareness towards a project, and I think I don't know if some of you know, but we hired 2 brand ambassadors to promote the project. At the beginning, we took a somewhat famous narrator from National Geographic by the name of Jason Silva, who has the Brain Games, which is a very successful National Geographic TV show, who did our project video. And we were successful on having Lionel Messi, the soccer player, as our brand ambassador to promote our project, and basically he's going to be our brand ambassador leading forward, since we're building a consumer electronic brand which needs to be massively adopted by the people. And I admit having Messi helped us create a great brand awareness.
No doubt. So a lot of ICO projects are finding it really difficult to get past the noise, even if they've got a genuine team, good product, just because of sheer size and number of ICOs we've got in the industry. Maybe Nick, you can come in. How do you suggest and advise ICOs to best approach media and you know, how to get past the noise and really start to build a relationship with media and bloggers? And maybe you can come in after.
Well, I want to build, that's a very good question, and I wish more ICOs would ask that question, like you were saying earlier, as to what people on the marketing side of cryptocurrencies want. Because, to be fair, it's a very cold reality, and trust me, I never saw myself working in this space a few months ago. But in regards to marketing, there's a lot of great people in the space who genuinely know how successful projects get off the ground and what are good ideas and what aren't, to a degree. We know how to filter as YouTubers, as bloggers, as marketers through a lot of the noise because we see so many projects. And if you have a general concept of it, you can get through the noise. But in the case of ICOs, they usually think that you'll want a form of payment or something that's going to incentivize coverage. I can tell you most YouTubers don't, because the whole space right now in cryptocurrencies is based on integrity. People are genuinely smart. They understand that there's a lot of failing projects. There's a lot of ideas, even here at this conference, who are raising millions in capital and won't be relevant in a year or two. It's the dot-com era of crypto. So what we want is good ideas. We want to promote good projects, and we want to be known for promoting good projects for those who really care about being here. So how do you go about actually making that effective and meeting towards our desire as marketers? Well, it's going to start by being able to sell us your idea very quick, because we hear hundreds of projects who are competing in the exact same industry, who are doing something slightly different or might offer something different or are attacking industries that don't belong on the blockchain. So you have to be able to filter through that noise by explaining an idea to us very fast and catching our attention with something that we actually find attractive. Doing a little bit of research on the platforms you want to market to, seeing what they care about. But outside of that, I think it's making practicality and thinking of something that many of us look towards. We're looking for long-term projects. So there needs to be I think I was talking to a guy from Sentinel Chain, Roy. He's the CEO of the project. And he talked to me about how his project has a chain of incentives. And that's a very big factor in this. People need to be incentivized to adopt your platform comparative to the dozens of others out there raising the same amount of capital. So things like that bring practicality, where you have a minimal viable product that we can see, something of an alpha where we can see that, oh, you're actually not just raising a lot of capital and you're not just forcing money upon us as marketers to advertise your project. You want to build something for the long term and you want to change people's lives. That's what we genuinely care about, at least the good people who are actually going to bring in investors, bring in people who actually want to stay with your project and find real change in the long term. So that's what I would say. I know it's a little bit of a ramble there, but I mean, it's very truthful. We care about long-term projects that are going to do well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I would add to that is that one of the best ways to communicate that is through storytelling, because storytelling is one of these mediums that it transcends culture, gender, time, race. There's something internal to human beings that allows us to connect to others through story. And so a lot of companies, when they try to pitch, they put themselves in the hero seat. I don't know, who here is familiar with the hero's journey concept? A few, good. So a lot of companies try to put themselves in the hero seat. This is completely the wrong way to go about it. You need to put your customer in the hero seat. You are the mentor as the company. You are helping your customer do something. So tell the story when you're pitching to media. Tell the story in that way. That puts you in that mentor role. You're helping your customer do something, and your customer is the hero, goes from here to here as a result of interacting with you. And when you tell that story, sometimes it just clicks with people.
I want to supplement to it. I think storytelling is the most important thing whenever you're trying to market something. But try to build your story based on emotions. I mean, if you can't build a brand without emotions, then it will be hard for the target audience to get a grasp of really connecting in depth with your company. So I think emotional story building is the key essential for a successful brand.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, you know, as it was said before, it should be based on something real. You should have a strong team, strong business model, and a good story. And I know that's a lot, but that's what it takes to build a good company and to communicate that.
Rebecca, I'll ask another question you can add on there. So what we're finding is that you produce a good white paper. That's your initial form of contact with the audience, right? Especially the sort of technical investor who's looking to invest in long-term projects that have a new innovation. Where can projects go wrong in the PR sense with a bad white paper, and where can they sort of, where's the best case, use case examples on what you should and should not sort of include in white papers? And maybe you can sort of add to that. We've seen a lot of what we call white paper, brief white papers, technical white papers, longer, you know, there's a whole sort of industry that is developed around white papers, but yet the projects, you never quite know what you receive when you receive a white paper. There's no formatting to it. There's a sort of haphazard. So sort of some sort of PR tips on what to do on a white paper.
Okay, so I don't want to give PR tips, because if you're having these PR problems, or the problem these guys were just talking about, like not rising above the crowd, you might suck. Right? You might suck at storytelling, but your project might suck. And most of your projects are mediocre because that's the definition of mediocre, okay? Like, just most people are average. And most of the ideas that come to us are average. And if you're not doing something like really wow, you shouldn't be rising above the crowd, and I shouldn't be giving you a PR tip. Just, you know, and I talk to a lot of people, and they come to me and I say, look, this is a collaborative industry. We're all experimenting, and it's really important, right? When you don't know what you're doing, it's really important to have a lot of parallel projects doing similar things, because we're not sure how it's going to turn out. But at the same time, if you're really similar to somebody else, join their team. We're all having recruitment problems. Just join their team. Don't spend 6 months, PR, $500,000 on something that's really similar. Call the guys up and say, hey, I see you're raising money, or you just raised money. I'm really passionate about this industry. I have a little bit of different ideas than you guys. Maybe I can join. I mean, it's just much wiser. But also, like I said, if you're doing something really similar, you're going to have problems rising above the crowd. Specifically on the white paper side, and you know that we're Israelis because we're so excited about disagreeing. We're like, oh, we disagree, yay. But we go through a really rigorous process. I would say that everyone that comes to us hasn't thought about every single aspect of what I think a good white paper is. A good white paper should cover all the aspects. It should cover, you know, and I write it like a story. You know, it's always, what's the industry, what's the challenge, like what's wrong right now, and how do I address that challenge? And then it's like, what's my business model? Again, there's two basic business models that I just want, you know, one is the business model we all know about making money, and the other one is sort of this blockchain economy, which is very different, and I won't go into it because that's not the topic here, but how does this thing become an ecosystem, right? And that's very different from a regular business. If you're thinking about a regular business, I would say you should be thinking about an equity token, because if it's about profit, share the profit with your investors. Like, that's pretty clear. And people are like, well, our lawyers said it's good enough to be a utility, we could get away with it. If you're in the getting away with something business, like, you're not changing the world for the better. If you're in the I'm going to make a profit and share with my investors business, I admire that. That's great. These people believed in you when you were little. So it should have all of those things that any decent business plan should have, and it should explain everything around the ecosystem. And if you want to write marketing documents, that's great. I don't really think that's what a white paper is for. And I think that writing a good white paper, whether you do it with me or with your own team, it's a rigorous thinking process. People come to me and they're like, I want the rush service 10 days. Like, if you don't want to go through the rigorous thinking process, next week you're going to meet an investor who's going to ask you these questions. Because we ask hard questions. So that's what I would say.
Well,
don't forget, you're not only writing white papers for investors. Actually, you're writing the white paper for very smart people, sometimes smarter than you are. And I think one of the important things that we had to do for writing our white paper, especially, we're developing a secure mobile phone with a cold storage and a blockchain network running on top of it. The most important thing for us was that we would not have a single hole in the white paper that very smart engineers can start engaging with questions that we will not have any answers for. And basically, I think that also what really helps create the credibility towards your project, that you let people, smart people, understand that you know what you're doing, exactly what you're doing, not only on token economy, not talking about marketing, biz dev, etc. But don't forget that a lot of the ventures are relying on deep technologies, and deep technologies has a lot of people that can try and find these loopholes within, and don't let them do that. Just be very, very professional on every word counts there.
Shash, maybe you could come in on, so aside from these wonderful white papers and these sort of influencers and their great sort of meritocratic tips, what most investors are saying is this ICO going to have a fizz? Is it going to have a buzz? Is it going to pop? Is it really going to sort of capture that imagination and scale fast? Is that Telegram group going to grow at a phenomenal pace? So maybe some ideas on where you find sort of inflection points that make an ICO really get that fizz and buzz.
I think so far the incentives that have been given, like when an ICO is done, you give incentives, you get in early, and you get 40%, 50% bonus. You get 40%, 50% bonus, and then after 5 days, you will only get 30% bonus, and then after like 1 month, you will get 0% bonus. And I think it's not working anymore. Or these incentive schemes, people are just waiting, like, we didn't sell anything today. What happened? People like stopped participating in ICOs? No. You're incentivizing on basis of time. Incentivize on basis of community. Find that community which attracts, which your project attracts. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that if you're a gamer, if it's a game-based project, if you have a certain score in a particular game or games, give them the incentive, because they will be the ones using your project. Why incentivize on basis of time? It's not Bitcoin anymore. Man, people who have tons of Bitcoin, they're there already. Why do you need to copy the same thing with your projects? That's the first question I ask. If it could be community, it could be a country. Why if you're a project out of Philippines and you want to build, let's say, a Bitcoin for Philippines, give the Filipinos, when you do your KYC, 10% bonus, 10% discount, whatever. So that's one thing that I recommend. And the other thing is, I kind of feel that there is place for mediocre ideas as well. Everybody doesn't have to be a $25 million ICO. Yes, they will not get listed on Binance if you're a $5 million ICO, but there is place for everyone. So I end up reading more than 15 white papers a day. Usually that's my daily thing. And I end up speaking with all of them because all of them want to do something. And then some of them are like, no, man, we just want to raise 5 million. We want to have our portal. We want to do this. And I think there is space for everyone here. And when it comes to collaboration, I think the fact that there are limited number of tokens says something. Like, so far, how many tokens should you have? There is no science behind it yet. And I think there should be. Everybody's like 100 million low supply, 30 million low supply, 10 billion high supply, value is not going to go up. Maybe, maybe not, but it's irrelevant. I think these numbers of tokens should be linked with what's the market like? What's your market size? So if let's say it's a $1 billion industry and the market size is, let's say, 100 million people. So essentially, if everybody has a token, they should be allowed to use your platform. And somebody holding more tokens will eat into somebody else not being able to use your platform. What I'm trying to say is that right now, all these platforms that are coming up are waiting for mass adoption. What is mass adoption is when the whole world starts using cryptocurrency, and specifically your cryptocurrency. And your cryptocurrency will never be mass adopted because you're trying to get 100 million customers, which doesn't happen in real world. It's not that easy. So your platform should be limited to a customer base. You should have a goal. I want to reach out to 10,000 customers, 100,000 customers, and when we reach that goal, we're done. That gives you the benefit to have somebody else who's your competition to be your friend. They could have the next 20,000 customers or 100,000 customers or whatever that number is. And hence, the tokens start making more sense. But so far, I've never met a project where the tokens make any sense. So I think this industry is very nascent right now, even in terms of where it's headed. Like, I mean, the more I get into it, the more I am lost, really.
Okay.
You said something about finding the people who are actually going to use your platform. I totally agree with that, because sometimes I get these pitches. So one of my podcasts, I talk about the future of humanity and how we can create a sustainable future for all of us, and it's a philosophy podcast, basically. And I get these pitches sometimes for ICOs who are doing something in gambling, and I go, are you nuts? Why are you talking to me? And I mean, my listeners are not going to want to listen to something to do with gambling. It has nothing to do with anything they're interested in. So find your tribe. Find the people who are actually going to love what you're doing. A lot of the time, like, you won't even have to pay for coverage if you just find the people who are actually passionate about the same things that you're passionate about, who are looking for exactly the kind of solution that you're offering. And it's not hard. I mean, all these communities are online everywhere. Just look up the keywords and follow them on Twitter and join those Telegram groups and Facebook groups and just talk to the people. It's not hard.
Finding your audience, that's extremely important. And knowing, like you said earlier, what they want. I think that's very, very important. In regards to white papers, I can tell you all one thing that I don't find with a lot of ICOs, but it's what I look for first and foremost, is I look beyond the amount of capital you're raising and your idea, and I say, okay, how far have you come? Because if we're really real about this, and if we're being critical here, we're not talking about an industry like transportation that costs billions of dollars to make something a reality, therefore we have to wait 5 or 10 years to see it. Many of these ICOs here and around the world that are raising millions of dollars of capital are technology. And technology, though it can be expensive in some industries, usually is something, out of the case of something like SIRIN Labs, which is, you know, you're building an actual phone, an entire network. A lot of these things are simply software, or they're simply technological innovations that use things such as RFID technology, something that is already massively scalable. And I see people raising a lot of capital, and when I read through the white paper, I'm saying, okay, where's the technology? Where's the minimal viable product? Where's the alpha software? Can I get a date on when that's going to be delivered? Oh, it's going to be 2 years from now after you've raised $100 million of capital. Well, there's a startup down the road that just did exactly what you did. It's not an ICO, and it delivered the exact same technology in 3 months, because that's the startup mindset. We shouldn't be waiting 2 years for simple technology or software, yet you raise $100 million in capital. I'm going to smell BS from a mile away, and I think most investors will as well. So if you're a real project, if you're actually serious about what you want to deliver, and it's something that's practical, then in this case, you need to have some minimal viable product, because in a space like cryptocurrencies that are intangible, we want something that's a little tangible, something that's a little bit real. And I think that's a very simple but very important analogy, because I can tell you when I cover ICO projects, even though I rarely do nowadays, I look for that. I know, for example, I did a video on my top 3 coins, and I do one each month for coins and projects that interest me. And I remember I covered Wabi. Who here knows about Wabi? Have you guys heard about that? Okay, so we got a few. That's good. Wabi is a very interesting project, and what they're doing is they're trying to face a really big issue, and that is either dilution of certain products in regards to baby formula and things in China that are multi-billion-dollar markets, and then of course there's also other competitors in the space that are doing it to fight counterfeiting products. And they do this through tracking RFID technology and having a mobile app. Now what's really interesting is that on their white paper, they did something exactly as to what I was talking about earlier in regards to something that's tangible. And I was able to watch through a link on the video. It takes me to a Vimeo link where I could actually watch a video of the founder of the project tapping his phone up to the RFID tag on the product. In an instant, I can see that that product works, that before they've even gone out and stepped into an ICO, that they have something that's tangible. And instantly, I was blown back, and I said, okay, I got to look into this more. It's something that's visual, it's not just text, and it's something that shows me, oh, So you're not just raising millions of dollars of capital to sell me an idea. You're actually serious about this. You put your own time and money into it, and you didn't make excuses. So again, I think we need more of that in the ICO space. I know it's critical, and sometimes it's not possible, but I think it applies to so many out there. And I see a lot of people raising money that really shouldn't be doing it yet.
Well, I can't agree more. Basically, we had a pitfall when we wrote our white paper. We said that we will enable peer-to-peer resource sharing, including battery. And people said, what, really? You can share your battery from one phone to the other? And they thought, what's that use case? And we were actually finding ourselves answering, or basically almost apologizing for writing this. And we've been doing a lot of Facebook Lives. Once a week, we introduce a team member, and we do a Facebook Live. And I think it was the 3rd broadcast that we did. We showed how we charge one battery to the other. And actually, if a Facebook Live, on average, we had 2,000, 3,000 views. That same video got about 8,000 or 9,000 views just for us actually putting the proof in the pudding, if that's the word to say. So always credibility and stand behind everything that you say you can do.
So we've got a big credibility issue when the project announces and either the hard cap is ridiculously low for the scope of the project or ridiculously high. So maybe we can all open up. What's your thoughts on soft cap setting, hard cap setting, or are we beyond this? Are this sort of soft and hard cap just arbitrary figures that just get plucked out the air, and are they really sort of damaging an industry? So just your views on soft and hard cap.
Absolutely not arbitrary. It must be backed with real economy. I think it also creates the credibility to show that you know what you're doing. I mean, if you don't know your numbers, how much it's going to cost you to develop whatever you're developing, and how much it's going to cost you to promote it, and how is your ecosystem going to sustain everything that you're trying to convey to your audience, then don't invest in projects that doesn't have a sustainable, I would say, fundraising caps.
Did you want to come in on when you sort of...
I'll just summarize it real quick. I obviously agree with that. If you're going to be raising capital and you don't know not only how much, well, if you determine a number, if you can't define why that is, that's very, very risky. So, I mean, obviously.
So there's a couple of things that we need to look at. As it was mentioned before by this gentleman here, yes, hard cap is very important, and you need to know how much to raise, but you shouldn't be thinking about it in terms of how much money am I going to need until the end of time. And that's how you end up with ridiculously large hard caps that are completely unnecessary. And at that point, you know, if it's $300 million, or how much Telegram is trying to raise, was it 2 billion they're saying now? 1 billion? 1.2. That's ridiculous. I mean, if as an investor, if you invest in that kind of project, what kind of growth potential does it have? Maybe it'll double, maybe triple, but it's not going to go 20x, 30x. So it's not actually a very good deal for investors. That's something important to consider. You know, if you're raising, say, 30 million, has a much higher chance of going 20x. But also it's important to look at the number of tokens that you're creating, because it has to be a number that is sustainable for whatever industry you're trying to serve, especially as your project scales. So if you release 100,000 tokens and you have 300 million users that you're trying to serve, that's simply not going to work. So I think both of those things are really important to consider.
I kind of have a slightly different view on this, and I think if you can raise 1.2 billion, go ahead, do it. Like, if you can, because this is the problem. Your goal as an ICO is to convince the investor that the Ethereum that he's putting in your wallet will be way less than the tokens that you're giving to him. You're essentially betting against Ether. Ideally, that's what 90% of the ICOs are. That means I give you Ether, you give me your token, and I want to do 5x on the Ether I give you. So if you can convince the guys that this is what's going to happen, you can have your money. If you can raise 80 million, that I think it's fine. How much ever you want to raise, it's fine. Because if Ether goes, let's say it was at a point of time about $1,500 recently, and some ICOs just shut shop and they're like, okay, we've reached our hard cap, and now they're at 800 right now, so they've actually literally lost money. 600. Sorry. Yeah. yesterday night, like, you know. So they've lost money. Like, they can't use it. Like, they have to be holding it till it reaches 1,500, else they never met their hard cap technically. So how much you're raising, what you're doing, etc., what the value goes up, I think these things don't make, there is no science behind it yet. And I feel if you can raise it, go ahead, raise it. But if you don't raise it, what happens is you have to hear stuff from the investors that when Moon, when Lambo, like when Bittrex, when Binance, and I think everything kind of comes together and you have to do everything the right way that you can. There are no real mistakes here. Like, people have made mistakes and recovered from them. People have made mistakes and gotten out of the system. And the thing with the ICO that one must remember is this is your one chance. Like, it's pretty much like getting married, right? So if you're doing it now, you have to ensure that this becomes successful, and if it does, you will have 20 other opportunities to be part of different projects. But if it is not successful, you will be always associated with an ICO which was not successful, and your investors will always be talking bad about you. So take that risk, you know, accordingly.
So let's wrap up in the interest of time. So we're fast approaching the era where there is no ICO. You have a private pre-allocation. It gets given out. The hedge funds, the syndicates, they take the share, and then so all this sort of media and PR and all the rest of it, hype, it's starting to have less relevance. It's who you allocate to, how you allocate, and where you allocate. So just your final summation, are we at the end of ICOs, and is it pre-ICOs, private allocations, and a little bit more reality to it, and less susceptible or bettors and speculators just sort of coming in looking for a 20x, and is that era over? So if we could just...
So yeah, for sure. When people come to me with their ICO now, I tell them, look, if you take a look at the market, pretty much everybody's raising 80 to 90% on pre-ICO. Anybody who sold out in X number of hours or seconds, that was all pre-ICO, right? That was not from the hype. They had people who were just ready to press the button. So absolutely. But I don't think that we're post-ICO. I think that we're at a stage in our maturity. You know, what ICOs promise for the future is that everyone will have the opportunity to invest in early stage organizations, companies, whatever you want to call these, right? And we don't have the protections for investors yet for that to be reasonable, right? Like, I don't want my kids or my grandmother or anybody who doesn't understand investments in startups to invest in early stage startups. But I do think everybody should have the right to. And we will have that eventually when the industry matures, when we have the protections. And I'm not talking about outside regulation. We shouldn't be waiting for that. We need to regulate ourselves and protect our own investors. So, you know, because I don't like this whole accredited investor thing. So I think that's going to come back. But right now we are at the stage where people need to be looking at who are those larger investors. And to that end, the most important skill isn't the marketing, it's the sales. And let me tell you, you guys do not listen. You do not listen. Like, I've been talking to people all the time at this conference, and if I say, listen, you know, there's this issue, you try to convince me. If that's the way you talk to your investors, you're never going to sell anything. Listen is the most important part of sales. Listen and solve a problem. And so all of you have to be out there. We all get these like presentation skills, and we never get listening skills. If you're out there trying to push stuff on people, you're never going to be able to improve your product. You're never going to be able to improve your story, and it's just not going to sell. So you guys had to be really clear. You're talking to smart people. If they're giving you feedback, pause before you answer.
Best tip I can give is just create long-term real value. Long-term real value. Even if you have investors contributing at the pre-sale and they flip your token once the ICO is out, it means nothing as long as you can sustain a long-term value.
Though I wouldn't consider myself as a part of the community that obviously wasn't here, a few years ago in the cypherpunk movement. What happens is I really do follow those who are in the cypherpunk movement, and that's pretty much people who are here basically at the beginning stages of the blockchain innovation in the early days of Bitcoin and Ethereum. But the reason I listen to them is because they're proposing something that's very important, and it has to do with the evolution of blockchains. So as we were talking about earlier, you guys listed some very, very good points. But when we were talking about soft caps and hard caps and how much capital you're going to raise, there's a very big flaw with all ICOs nowadays. Practically every single ICO misses out on one thing, and that's not the practicality of your application for the long term. It's how you're going to sustain yourself financially. Let's say, for example, you planned, no one's perfect in planning things. You have a timeline and a roadmap. You might have everything organized in the best team. Let's say you estimated to raise $20 million to deliver your project. And now you need 40 million. Well, you've already done an ICO. And like we were saying earlier, you've got one chance at this. You're trying to build something on the blockchain or some industry on the blockchain. And whether or not it's sustainable or not, you need a certain amount of capital to do things. Things cost money. And I would say to look at not only previous projects like Dash, which have a decentralized autonomous organization that brings in capital like a treasury, but look towards people like Charles who are working on Cardano, which is a third-generation blockchain, where they have three aspects. They don't just have scalability, which is an issue in cryptocurrencies, interoperability, communicating with other blockchains. The biggest factor is sustainability. If you're building a platform that is not going to change an industry for 1 week through its capital that's raising, and is actually going to change and revolutionize entire industries or multiple industries if you're building a protocol, in that case, you can raise an ICO, but if there's something not built on the platform to sustain itself, like a treasury system, so for example, if there's some reward on the platform of some sort, distributing it back into the treasury that can help to funnel project development in regards to marketing development in the future, you're going to most likely eventually run out of capital. And again, if you're attacking entire industries, whether or not it's practical on your technology, the core foundation, you need to set up a foundation philosophically in regards to raising capital through the system itself, through the user base, to continuing to funnel the ecosystem. It requires capital, and it's not going to last you for your roadmap. You're going to have to do things after that. Facebook didn't build itself and stop at 2010 and say, well, that's going to be the only platform. We're not going to acquire other platforms. We're not going to touch other industries. We're just going to stay where we are. We don't know how things evolve over time, but we know that it usually gets costly. So having something to found that ecosystem is very important.
Yeah, so as was mentioned before, we're now moving into a time where a lot of the time companies don't even reach the ICO, they sell out in the pre-sale. And I think that's actually not necessarily a bad thing, because when you have a few intelligent investors versus 1,000 clueless investors, it's actually better for the long term. Now, sometimes people think about marketing in terms of how do I market my ICO, and then they don't think past that. This is very bad for the longevity of the project. Actually, you need to be thinking about how do I market my project for the long term, and then it comes down to community. How do you attract the right kinds of people that are going to want to stay with your project and care about your project and participate in your ecosystem for the long term? And that comes to developers, if you're building a platform or a protocol, and users, and investors, and bloggers, and media, and everybody. So it is really about community in the long run. And if you're not thinking about that, then your project is simply not going to survive, because you can't build something with just 10 people or 20 people, however many people you have on your team. You need thousands of people and all of their ideas and all of their contribution, because you're not going to spot all the problems and you might not know what people need. So it comes back to the thing about asking questions. And you need to ask questions of a lot of people to get the general consensus, not just a few.
I think at the ICO stage, I can easily divide into three main things that an ICO should take care of. One is, how will you take care of your early investors? Like, you need to tell the early investors that this is why you should buy into the project now and not when the platform comes out. Because if there's no value in buying it now, there is no reason to. We can wait for the platform to come out and then invest. The second thing is, how are you taking care of the economic health of your token? If you have intelligent investors, that's fantastic, right? If these guys, you can force them to hold the token for 3 years, 2 years, the vesting period can be longer, that's fine. But the economic health of the coin itself, I think, is something that everybody should keep in mind. And the last thing would be ensure that your token is married to your platform. Like, it shouldn't be like the platform is amazing, but the token has no value in the platform. And that's the time when I kind of never end up working or even talking to the projects, because it doesn't make any sense. The platform is so amazing, we're selling the platform, everybody's interested, they love the platform, it's so amazing. And then the token, oh yeah, we have a token. What are you selling, the platform or the token? We're selling the token. What's the point of selling the token when the value is in the platform, but the token has nothing to do with the platform? And those are the three things I think should be taken care of.
Okay, we've overrun by about 5 minutes, so is there any pressing question that we can keep rather, maybe run round and keep it rather sharp?
So I'm curious, I like the idea of longevity and the continuous project, right, the long term. I would like to hear your opinion on after ICO communication. What I've been hearing is pre-ICO and ICO itself. So is it what I'm hearing from him is having a brand ambassador for the product, but the user is one of the players of the ecosystem. So is it like normal company doing communication, or any good story about it?
So I think that an ICO should be managed like a multi-stage rocket. You have the pre-sale stage where you need to escape Earth gravity and you need to deploy certain engines. Then you have the crowd sale, the ICO itself, which has its specific requirements. But the most important thing is when you're trying to hit the moon. Actually, the moon is too close. Elon Musk is flying to Mars today. I don't know if you know. And this is actually, I think, practices of how to build a brand, how to build a company using all the right ingredients in order to grow your audience, to be successful in your sales, to manage your marketing metrics in the right way. I mean, this is actually the real game. Getting money or getting your project funded, it's nice, but I think the most crucial and important stage is where you finished your ICO and you now really show that you know how to deliver. That's the most important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that marketing has potential to change dramatically in this world, right? So like doing epic shit is really important. Like your product has to be good and you have to serve the people you said you're gonna serve. And I think that more and more in today's world already, people don't want to be marketed at. They want to ask their friends or hear about something that's so awesome, right? So I was staying at a hotel here, and there was a phone that they have in every room, like a cell phone with unlimited data. I'm like, I put that on my Instagram, right? They were just doing something epic, and I wanted to share it. And I think that because we're talking about a decentralized world and a distributed world, marketing is going to change fundamentally, and it's going to be more about communities, serving your communities, and have people tell each other about stuff. So be doing really great things. And we already know from the old world, acquiring a customer is really hard compared to just upselling to, or whatever, serving your other customers. Whoever are your fans now, whoever are the people you serve, just serve them and be awesome. And I think that's the best marketing you can do.
Sorry, just a quick one, Mike Johnston. I've heard terms, and thank you very much for a very interesting kind of panel. It's refreshing to actually hear people saying that, hey, you've got to have a sustainable business here instead of, hey, blockchain is the solution to everything. We've heard terms like betting and gambling, and I can get away with it, that's why I'm doing an ICO and investor protection, etc. I wonder, it's probably a difficult question to answer, but do you have a sense of what kind of proportion of the representation here, which I'd suggest is probably fairly representative of the global kind of community, of what proportion of companies in a loose term that you see here actually fit the category of that sustainable business model, if you like, going forward? Have they run a business before?
So Vitalik Buterin recently said that 90% of all ICOs will fail. I think he was being too nice. I think it's more like 99.5% of all ICOs will not have anything after 5 years, because this space is like the Wild West. And you're right, people are just getting away with ridiculous things.
Cool. So you put a cross where you think he is.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question. I think the longevity of the platform and you know how sustainable it's going to be, that can be created, right? That's the easy part. But people have like 10-year roadmaps and stuff. But the thing is that the founders, the co-founders need to figure out a way how that becomes a system that starts running on its own after a while. And then the team, et cetera, can become slightly more redundant, you know, not so involved in it. And I think that is something, if any one of them is saying that okay, we will set this up, we will get this going, and we will have this many customers, and then we're done with this platform. I think that would be something interesting for me to see. And if somebody has that to offer, I'd be interested in that project. Because I don't know how many people will survive 10 years, 20 years, et cetera. So if you make a roadmap for 10 years, I don't know if your team isn't there, what happens to the project? So that kind of is also a concern. But if they're like, we want to finish it and get out, like be done with our work, I'd be happy to see that once in a while.
I wanted to add something. I think it was Charlie Lee that said this recently, that any sufficiently advanced incompetence is indistinguishable from a scam. I think that was really well said, because there are a lot of people who are coming into the space who don't really know what they're doing, and they don't really know that they don't know what they're doing. So they might not think that they're scammers, but they're just actually really, really incompetent. Yes.
Okay, unless there's really pressing, we're going to do our wrap up and then.
Yeah. So yeah, just you know, so you were saying about experience and how many of these people are really going to be sustainable. Look, I'm a you know, experienced entrepreneur. Nimrod is an experienced entrepreneur. Like, most of the stuff we do fails. That's just, you know, like, that's the reality of business. I think the percentages are going to be a lot higher. I think even you were generous. It's just, you know, even if you're really great, it's very, very risky to invest in new business. But, you know, it's a lot of fun.
Can I just apologize to the rest of the room for opening such a can of worms? I think
But no, but it's just, you know, you got to know that, like, we're all in business, and in business, most of what we try fails. And that's why the team, which you started with, and which is a good way to end, right? The team is so important because you need to be resilient, you need to know most of what you try fails, and you need to keep trying.
So I think I said a lot, but don't forget, if you're not here to solve real life pains, and if you're not professional enough, then just don't be, or just don't do. Otherwise, you take people's money, and it would be very hard for you to return it to you. And don't forget that God is in the details.
My wrap up would be, because I'm getting calls that we're about 12 minutes over now, going into lunch, and this is how much everyone loves ICOs, right? We skip lunch for it. So I would wrap up and say, don't get over-advised. There's a lot of people that are going to advise you X, Y, Z, and we understand this, and we've navigated this space, and we've suddenly got some magic formulas. It's nonsense, right? Just take really big risks and really try to sort of work on what your really tokenized model is and what you're actually doing on the chain and what you're actually offering. So, you know, where is a real danger that I've walked around the sort of conference, and every sixth person is an advisor of some description, or a ICO incubator or accelerator, or, you know, so the ecosystem around it, maybe it's grinding sort of downfall. So we find ICOs, you know, early days of Ethereum, 98% of people said it was completely unviable, right? So look for that really risk-taking, unviable ICO and throw some tokens in.
I'll say in summary, to kind of take a hybrid of the two questions we had, to really go about good projects, you do need the sustainable aspect, because I think many people are finding here at the convention, there's a lot of ICOs here, and just generally in the ICO space, that there are whales in the industry, people who are large-scale investors who will buy out your ICO, they will take huge chunks of your general ICO, and oh wow, you've got all the capital you need in the world. It doesn't matter if it's 5 million, 10 million. So the raising of capital is not hard. And if you're here to make money, well, to be fair, I mean, you can go about doing it if investors are willing to put their money into it and they don't care about the idea or really doing the research to make sure that that idea is sustainable. That's fine. I don't agree with the intentions, but again, it's a free market in that sense. The real long-term game, and I think it was someone here on the panel, I think you might have mentioned it, how it's not hard to raise capital, but sustaining the project in the long term is the real question here. And that's where a lot of the things in regards to what we would call scams in the ICO space, they fail at, whether it's intentional or not. The best thing you can do is make sure of two things, that before you even raise capital, you know that your project is, you have to think of every corner of whether or not that project's going to fail. I don't need to ramble on about that for hours. I think we all get that. You need to be sleepless at night thinking about, look, I'm working with $50 million of people's money. Is this going to go to good work? Is this something that I believe in? And I've taken every ounce of criticism that I can, listening to your community, taking that in. And the second thing as well, and what I see with so little ICOs, but it makes me really happy because it shows me they're not just there for money, and it shows it to the investors and users, is simply keeping in touch, doing weekly updates. There's so little ICOs that do that. They went out and they raised $50 million, and then I see them on a vacation out somewhere in a tropical island. And not even kidding, there's been ICOs that have actually done that. And they're not there active on social media. They'll do one update every 6 months on their Medium account. And I think that's, you have such platforms nowadays where you can easily have the audience. They'll flock to your social media because they want to hear what you're doing. So again, I won't ramble on about it. I think we get the concept. But generally speaking, don't think just about raising capital. Think about, okay, once we raise that capital, once we're in the development process, how are we going to market to our audience through social media and all the free outlets that you have where your audience is going to flock in the first place? So, yes.
I think we're like really running over time, so I wanted to thank everyone for coming and cutting into your lunch.
Fantastic. I mean, the speakers here, they'll skip lunch for you, so come and approach them now. Thank you.